Caoimhe, Trócaire works with an amazing organisation called Rabbis for Human Rights, which is a Jewish organisation for rabbis who physically stand in front of bulldozers to prevent the demolition of Palestinians' homes, sometimes in the middle of the night. And this happens maybe in the last few weeks and definitely in the last few months. So we are talking about today. Tell us about Trócaire's policy with regard to that.
So Rabbis for Human Rights are one of a number of organisations, Israeli organisations that we work with, who very much believe that the occupation is illegal, as the UN has declared and many other international bodies. What they do is they try to work with Palestinian communities to defend them against what is their reality, which is that there isn't good faith being demonstrated by the State of Israel. What is happening, and what I observed, is that communities are increasingly being encroached upon by settler land, which is not State of Israel policy, but where the state does not intervene to protect the Palestinian communities. So, for example, you might have a hilltop which is settled by a group of settlers, and that gradually they expand the area of the buffer zone, if you like, which is under their control. And whereas the State of Israel should be intervening and keeping things to where the agreements have been set, in fact they stand back and do nothing, while Palestinian farmers and communities and families are shot at, have their homes destroyed. So I witnessed populations, villages of Palestinians who were able to show me where their homes were once. They were able to show me wells that had been destroyed by local settlers. And the fact is that there is not accountability for the action of the settlers in the way that there should be. So again, I think there's this official policy which is around frustrating the genuine, normal rights of Palestinians to continue with their lives. So I think when we have those things going on, like if the State of Israel was to take action, strong action, consistent action against what settlers are doing, which is outside what they, the boundaries of what's currently agreed, then I think Palestinians might be able to see that there is some good faith there. But when that is not visible on the ground, and people are suffering time and time again from their homes being demolished, like literally tonight in the South Hebron Hills, there are people sleeping under canvas, and their tents are under demolition orders. The temperatures are pretty similar to what they would be here. It's a shocking humanitarian situation, which is very similar to what I would have witnessed not terribly far away, but in a different context, in Lebanon, where Syrian refugees had come over the border, escaping very, very live conflict with literally just what they were able to carry. And I was shocked to see that the situation in South Hebron is so similar, that families are living in similar conditions to Syrian refugees who are fleeing one of the worst conflicts and conflagrations of our times.
Yanky, the average Israeli did never wants this level of human rights abuses on their neighbours. Is there much discussion when you're in Israel with your fellow Israelis about, let's say, the settlers in Hebron are infamous. We hear about them all the time, and the way they attack Palestinians. But then again, Palestinians are known to attack back. It's a separate conflict of its own in a certain way. But when it comes to, let's say, land demolition and other situations like that we mentioned there, the likes of Rabbis for Human Rights, what's the discussion that you have with your Israeli friends and family?
Israel is a hyperactive democracy with a multitude of parties, far too many, every spectrum of political thought, and it has always been so. Since before the state, the level of political dialogue, if you like, the politicization of individuals in Israel is quite astonishing. Everyone is a politician. So everything is up for grabs. The way that the settlers behave, should they or shouldn't they be subject to legal restrictions, is something which is every day in the newspapers and the media. The root of the barrier and the High Court rulings on it. These are things that are discussed every day. But I think that the common denominator, and this is really where I started this evening, and I say this because I've lived there, and I say this because I know people. I don't know politicians out there. I'm not a politician, and I don't mix with politicians. I only mix with my family and friends who live there and have lived there for a long time. Their everyday concerns are for the overall security of the country. And that includes Sderot, and it includes East Jerusalem, and it includes everywhere else. everyone believes that it is the role of the Israeli government to conduct peace negotiations and to try and make all these questions subject to an agreement. Because once there's an agreement, it doesn't matter what will matter is what is the boundary, how is the boundary policed, how will the two states maintain friendly relations that don't involve conflict. These are the things that peace negotiations are meant to lead to. And that has to be what everybody wants. I really believe there is consensus that that is the most important thing. There are lots of things that go on that people aren't comfortable with. You've got some rabbis who, and I've met some of them have visited Ireland, and I think that these are very well-meaning people, and I think they do an important thing. They point out inconsistencies maybe in Israeli policy. But then, none of this is in a vacuum, and that's the bit that I think is missing. It's not as if Israel is clomping around looking for a fight. Israel is on the defensive. Israel is surrounded by some enemies that are threatening it on an existential basis, and it's a bit difficult to make policies that please everybody in that sort of situation. Negotiations for peace are the only route that is feasible.
I'm just going to come out to the audience, but also just Joanna, because I know you have to leave there. Should Ireland be using it? So I suppose we're not a neutral country. We're non-formally aligned, but we are pretty much neutral, theoretically anyway. And we have a history of conflict, and we like to think of ourselves as a country that can do good on the world stage. And that's where we use soft power, let's say. But successive Irish governments have always been critical of Israel, to the point where, when I speak to Israeli politicians, they don't really tend to listen to Ireland anymore because it's always been one way. Do you think you could, what's the discussion in the Oireachtas? Should Ireland be a little bit more open-minded to listening to both sides? How can it use its influence to broker peace instead of just being one direction?
Yeah. Well, I actually think that the present government has shifted a bit compared to the last government, in that there has been visits, bilateral visits between the two countries, including the Taoiseach Minister for Foreign Affairs, Eamon Gilmore. He visited Israel and he visited the Palestinian territories as well, and we have had the Comhlamh visited there, the Speaker of the Knesset visited Ireland. So there's been kind of work between the Minister for Justice, Alan Shatter, and both the Palestinian Authority and the Israeli government, where they've, there's been kind of programs where they would work together on certain issues, including to do with road safety was one of the things. So I feel the government is making more effort to engage with both sides recently, and at the same time, Eamon Gilmore is very critical of Israel and will be, he will state his criticisms to both sides. So, I would say that Eamon Gilmore is probably one of the people that's more pro-Palestinian on the political spectrum. I think that, and that's why another reason why I oppose boycotts. I think I don't think it is a good idea if you want people, want to work with people towards peace, to isolate them, and I think boycotts isolate them, and there's other implications as well. And I don't think the movement is growing here at all, because I think when the whole incident around the Dervish thing, I think there was a lot of opposition. When people saw it in practice, they were opposed to a culture of boycott, including people like Fintan O'Toole, who would have been in favour of other kinds of boycotts, but he was against a cultural boycott. There are implications because of the whole issue, the whole history of anti-Semitism and boycotts and all that. There are other aspects to this that are important. But what I think is you should engage with both sides. I think that's the answer, and I think for Ireland that is its role, to put diplomatic pressure where it can, to use the European Union as a forum for that, to be critical, and obviously to condemn acts that it needs to, but also to work with both sides. And I don't agree. I think there's been a lot of good faith on both sides, both the Palestinians and the Israelis, where there are moderates, and those are the future of the peace process.
Thanks very much for that, Joanna. So anybody want to make a point there?
A number of times you said you don't agree with bringing history into it, but you mentioned the Holocaust a good few times in your first opening conversation. Excuse me. You said you don't believe in boycotts, yet you stood outside supporting the Duns boycott itself. And there's many other issues. Can I ask you a question? You said you've been to Israel on public on a public trip. Why have you not travelled to Palestine? Maybe not publicly, but the other representatives of the panel have maybe not been public representatives, but have travelled to Palestinian territories, both Gaza and the West Bank. One, why have you not been to Palestine? If you're a spokesperson on this issue.
No, I'm not a spokesperson on this issue.
Second question, well, if you're now speaking at a public debate on this issue.
Yeah.
Second question, you said you give 2 points of view just for the sake of giving a balance for democracy. Do you give 2 points of view when racism is brought up? The pro-racist argument and the anti-racist argument? And do you see any correlation between racism and Zionism?
I don't put an argument in favour of racism. I just think that's not the same. You know, I don't think it's the same issue. I didn't say you shouldn't bring history into it. What I said is, you know, I don't look at it. You know, this is, you know, back, 1,000 years. The people were here. I just say that there are two peoples there now, and we have to negotiate. Like, we can't just eradicate one side. We have to have two sides. We have to sort out two states living side by side. That's what I was saying, that you have to work with the existing situation. I'm not a spokesperson. I'm just, I'm not in the Foreign Affairs Committee. I'm just, a person who's expressed a point of view. And, like, my view is nuanced. It's, I don't know everything about the issue. I don't necessarily get everything right, but I know that the view I express a lot of people have. They feel uncomfortable. They don't agree totally with Ireland-Palestine solidarity. They don't agree totally with people who absolutely defend everything Israel does. They're somewhere in the middle. I'm one of those people.
Well, you said a number of times you don't know a huge amount about the topic and maybe you're not as informed. Why would you not feel maybe compelled to travel to?
Oh yeah, sorry, I did explain that. I'm sure I'll probably get an opportunity in the future. Lots of people here haven't travelled to one or other or both. What I said was that when I was in the European Affairs, there was a delegation and I couldn't get on it. I wanted to go, but I couldn't because Labour was only given two places and they went to Michael D. Higgins and Joe Costello.
There is a very unique historical comparative that is Ireland. Over 400 years ago, we had a very explicit British policy of plantation, and the result of that policy is a conflict that still goes today, despite our very successful peace process. There is still violence today in Ireland as a result of that plantation policy. The equivalent today is settlement policy, and it is essentially a state policy of Israel to have settlement in Palestinian territories. And on that basis, I'd also just like to bring back what the speaker from the Israeli embassy said a while ago, that to call the pullout of troops from Gaza a gesture is a complete misunderstanding of the word gesture. To give back something that you took from someone is not a gesture. That's like me taking your wallet, giving it back to you and then asking you for a tenner. That makes no sense. And in that context, the question is, going to the peace table, both sides want peace, everyone wants peace. But it's not a peace negotiation, it's almost like a surrender negotiation. The Palestinians are asked to give up so much, and the Israelis are asked to give up what they've already taken.
Well, it's conflict, so that's what happens in conflict. You lose and you negotiate territory. So I think that point is also good. And in regard to Gush Katif, I think what the representative was making the point that they were giving back settlements. You want to take that point up, Yanky?
I think we think we've heard enough on that, but I want to relate to the question that was raised earlier. I am a Zionist. I'm a very proud Zionist, because Zionist means somebody who believes that the Jews should have the land that was always theirs. If anyone wants to challenge me and call me a racist, hey, go ahead. Anyone who knows me knows that that is ridiculous. I think that the whole of the Zionism equals racism, this stunt pulled by the Palestinians in the 1970s in the United Nations and later rescinded, was just that. It was a stunt. It was introducing the sort of language that is absolutely the antithesis of what is needed today. What is needed today is for politicians, the people who lead countries, to sit down and negotiate. That has been in world history the way all conflicts get settled. In the end, there's always a peace conference and there's always borders drawn and redrawn. That's the way it's always been. That's the way it has to be.
Okay, anybody else, just quick before we wrap up, just that guy there in the front row.
Boycotts and how they leave a bad taste in Jewish and Israeli mouths. And whether you like it or not, Israel does view Europe as a continent of where a lot of historical anti-Semitism comes from. And I aim this question particularly at Representative Trócaire there. That is it appropriate that both Trócaire and the Irish Palestinian Authority campaign use a narrative of Christianity in their? They do. I mean, the Irish Palestinian Authority campaign uses a woodcutting of Jesus at the checkpoint on the online stall, and Trócaire is the official charity of the Irish Catholic Church. So, do you think it's appropriate?
Trócaire's mandate is to work with people in need, regardless of their faith, their creed, their gender, their background. We absolutely do not work with Christians above Muslims, above anybody else. So that question, I'm sorry, but it's just not really relevant to Trócaire.
Can I just ask, how many people think that boycotts actually work? I'm just going to show of hands. Is that about 70%? 70% of people think that So do they think that the boycott? How many people here are supportive of the Palestinian, let's say, more side of things and Israeli side of things? Palestinians? Well, I mean, are there people here from Palestine? I'm just asking, just abroad.
Pro-justice, I think a lot more people put their hands up.
Okay. Okay, I don't like that you use the words pro-Palestinian, pro-Israeli. It's deeply simplistic. We're all pro both sides. But anyway, I just wanted to ask that question. But yeah, okay.
Can I just make a point about? Sorry, it's working now. Just what Yanky was saying about it's about negotiations and it's about us coming to the table, or both sides coming to the table, and how we move forward and how we make borders from this and from these negotiations. The real issue and the real problem that we have and working on the ground is the EAPPI is the viability of a two-state solution is being killed by the expansion of settlements. I mean, even now, it's going even further, saying into the Jordan Valley, which is becoming one of the most fertile areas of the Palestinian territories, which now they're also trying to claim within this thing. So I really don't think you can say just having negotiations going on indefinitely is going to create a just and peaceful solution to the conflict.
And Michael, I'll come back to you on that in a second, Yanky, because the idea of a contiguous state of Palestine is very difficult when you look at the map and how the settlements are snaking through parts of Palestinian land, particularly settlements like Mali Adamin, where the SodaStream factory is located near. It looks almost impossible to try to create a viable state. But like you said, negotiations, and I'll get back to you on that. I just wanted to ask you one thing about, because we use the word apartheid is sort of, no, I know that. When you're in the West Bank, there are roads and roundabouts and areas that Palestinians are not allowed on. They're allowed into some settlements, but not by car, only by walking, and there are roads that they are simply not allowed to use.
Yeah, I mean, it is a complete environment of discrimination, especially within the West Bank and also within Israel in terms of Arab communities. I know you said that there is no discrimination. There really is. I witnessed it on a daily basis. For me to travel from, say, Bethlehem up to Jayus, which is a really, really tiny distance, it will take literally hours all day because of if I'm travelling on a Palestinian bus, they're not allowed to use Israeli roads. I mean, you can't call that anything but discrimination. There's so many sort of different areas that this kind of comes into in terms of discrimination, in terms of trying to get to work, the checkpoints, all of that. And excessive use of force, again, was something I don't think I really got to talk about, but within the territories is carried out with impunity, and that's by the military and settlers. And again, there's never any justification for it, but there's never any recourse for it, and they are never brought to justice on these issues. Whereas on the Palestinian side, it is a major issue anytime there's any sort of attack like that.
Just on that issue, because it is the apartheid word is used, and you've absolutely said that under no circumstances could you say that Israel is a racist state or an apartheid state, and you gave important examples such as the number of Arabs in the Knesset and the judge that obviously sent Ehud Olmert. Oh no, it wasn't Ehud Olmert, it was Katzaf, yeah. Anyway, so but just that point, as a Palestinian, there are roads that you simply are not allowed on based on the fact that you're a Palestinian. You know, that does resemble absolute discrimination, or is absolute discrimination.
I think that the situation in the West Bank, very fluid, it's a tinderbox, and it is really about security. And it's the security element which is causing a lot of the problems on both sides, especially in terms of the way people conceptualize it. And I keep repeating that is exactly what one negotiates about. You don't negotiate on the weather. You negotiate on hard facts on the ground that will make a peace viable, a border viable, the two states viable, relations between two states viable, economic sharing viable. That's exactly what you negotiate about. I'm not in any way saying that it is not very difficult in certain areas, not all areas. There are some cities that don't have any problems because it's like an ecosystem where they're okay. Yes, it is very difficult to move from the occupied territories into Israel and back again, because there is a security problem. You can't have open borders if anyone can just cross and take with them suicide bombs. So it is not as simplistic as you're making out. I'm not in any way diminishing either the work that you're doing or the need for it. I'm not. But I'm saying that to make out that this is like a capricious decision by Israel, yeah, this is good for us, let's keep it like that. It's just not so.
Well, impunity is very important, and to prove that this is not a pernicious act perpetrated by the State of Israel, then you would ensure that people who went above and beyond what they're supposed to do with regard to security would be punished, and that does not seem to be the case, as Rachel was pointing out.
Yeah, I look, I'm not an expert on checkpoints, and I have not been where you've been. So I totally accept what you're saying. All I'm saying is, this is not done in a vacuum. This is not happening because someone says, oh, let's do that for fun. There is a background, there is a history, there is an ongoing security problem. That the fact that the number of suicide bombings has gone down also doesn't happen by itself. It's because Israel knows how to defend itself. It's a very high cost. It's a high cost at every level. It's a high cost in terms of how much Israel is spending, and it's a high cost. No one wants the occupation, but no one knows how to get rid of the occupation unless there's a negotiated settlement.
Okay, and just briefly, and then just very briefly then to Caoimhe, just to wrap up and finish there.
Fine, it's just that the issue of security seems to be always the primary issue for Israel over peace and over democracy. I mean, you don't get security through weapons and militarization and oppression. That just breeds radicalization. I think the way that you can gain peace is through democracy and through acceptance and of other people's rights. And I think that is really the main issue, that the facts on the ground is that people do not have their rights in the occupied territories or in Gaza, and that the impetus is all on security at the expense of a whole population.
And then Caoimhe, last word to you.
I mean, very finally, I agree. I think that there's a lot that Rachel has said that I won't repeat, which I completely agree with. I think that what we see is a situation where there is massive frustration of ordinary people going about their daily lives, and where security is sometimes used disingenuously in order to continue with policies which perhaps aren't necessary in the same way as they might have been seen to be necessary in the past. Ultimately, this is around accountability. All sides who are perpetrating violations need to be held to account, whether they are settlers, whether they are militants in Gaza, whether they are part of Hamas, Palestinian Authority, or the Israeli government.
Okay, we'll leave it there. But thanks a million for everybody for coming tonight. Thanks to Rachel, Caoimhe, Yanky, and earlier Joanna.